Welcome to the Toronto Real Estate Podcast, where we dive into the ever-changing world of residential real estate and the dynamic lives of those who thrive in it. Today, we explore a unique and actually very common facet of the industry: real estate couples working together while simultaneously living together. From enhanced teamwork and shared goals to the challenges of blending personal and professional lives, we uncover the pros and cons of this real estate partnership. My name is Marin. I am a broker and a co-founder of Fox Marin. This is my partner in crime that I live with and work with, Mr. Ralph Fox, our broker of record and co-founder of Fox Marin. Good morning, Mr. Fox.
Good morning, Corey. Haven't seen you in about 45 minutes. How are you today?
I'm good. We're just coming off of a long weekend. So when this gets published, I think that will make sense. So I feel pretty refreshed.
You look refreshed.
Oh, thank you. Are you ready to get down and dirty with this conversation? This means for you specifically, more so than me, exposing a little bit of behind the scenes of your personal life, which is not always something people know much about when it comes to you, including myself. So this might be more of a therapy session than anything else.
Wow. Well, I got my Kleenex box ready to go, Corey.
My Kleenexes are always ready, but you knew that already.
I did. And I did.
Okay, well, let's jump into this. So let's talk about how, and maybe you're the one to kickstart this, talk about how we started working together to begin with.
Well, it's interesting because I think this is an interesting topic beyond real estate, because there are couples that work together in other businesses or industries as well. So I don't think this is real estate specific conversation. It's more interesting the dynamic of a couple that works together and lives together. You know, for us, that was never, ever the intent.
Ever.
And it was something that we never, ever really wanted to do.
Ever.
It just, ever. It just sort of morphed into something, and then into a brand, and then into a business, and then into a brokerage. But it was very, very organic and happened very slowly and then very quickly over time.
Yes. And I think it's just interesting to know that when I met Ralph for the first time, Ralph was a very tenured broker already. And I was just one of those many hundreds of thousands of Toronto people getting their license. And so when I first met Ralph, I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited in getting my real estate license. And I think Ralph was probably like, oh my God, we just don't need another one of you out here in the world transacting or trying to transact. And we both joined you were already at a brokerage and I joined a different brokerage. And we were working independently while living together. And then just slowly, we just started crossing over in terms of clients. So if one of us was too busy, the other one would jump in and take over for that client's showings for the day, or cover somebody else's, each other's open houses, or jump in on a conversation where one person's personality might be really helpful for the conversation. And we just, as you said, we just sort of amalgamated over time organically, really just helping each other out with the volume that we were taking care of.
Yeah. And then as that sort of evolved, we had this really amazing opportunity to sell a development site. And so it was at that moment where we had been promised a site by a developer that we were like, okay, well, you being at one brokerage and me being at another brokerage no longer makes sense. And we need to put everything under one umbrella. And so that was one of those moments that expedited things very, very quickly. And it was like, okay, well, if we're going to move forward with this opportunity, we've got to make some moves very quickly, and we need to amalgamate like right away.
Yeah. Like, let's formalize this. And we did this all, in a week?
Yeah.
It was crazy times back then. And how long ago was that, Ralph?
Oh, I'm going to say like 8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. We're never really sure. And we don't even know how long really we've been together now. 13 or 14 years. I just know we were a lot younger when we met.
Yes. And a little bit more naive.
Yes, completely.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything else you wanted to add to that? I heard you take a breath.
No. And then the next evolution of that was we were one of the first, I would say, teams, I guess, at that point in time, which is what we were operating, to really spend a lot of time and energy and money on branding. And so we built out this brand that became Fox Marin.
Yes.
And it was really, 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 really expensive. And
And really,
especially at
really,
the
really,
time.
really hard.
Exactly. And so Corey and I often joke that while we live together and while we're common law, we never officially got married. And the joke is that I got on one knee and said, Corey, would you co-brand with me?
Yes.
And that co-branding was probably more expensive at the time than a wedding. So there you go.
And now you truly are stuck with me because our company's
Yeah.
name was so expensive and a huge investment of both time, resources, stress, and financial. So now Fox Marin has to just thrive forever. I think the main point of this and the objective of this podcast today for the listeners, especially people who work together or are thinking about working together, why this event ends up happening, is to talk about some of the advantages. So I'm just going to toss out some ideas and then let's just take it from there. Like our communication style, we understand each other's tone, our body language, we hyper trust one another. And I think that's just strengthened more and more over the years. And then I think a huge piece of this, especially in real estate, and I'm sure this applies to many other businesses and entrepreneurs, is the hours and the time commitment to have a successful business in real estate or anything requires relentless hours, time commitment, weekends, working while on vacation. And we always say to each other, like, how does anyone do this without having their person along for the ride with them? So I think that's another advantage. And obviously, we share a huge amount of common goals and like a pursuit for success. So why don't we jump into some of these advantages, Ralph?
Yeah, I think one of the main things is that this business can be very lonely. And people think that it's a very sociable business, which it can be in moments. But at the end of the day, you spend a lot of time alone in the car or in front of your computer. And oftentimes you have a lot of important decisions to make about how to handle something or how to word an email. And it's really good to be able to have somebody who can be there and empathize and sympathize, not just as your partner, but somebody who actually can, because they're in it themselves and they've experienced everything that you are experienced. And it also is such a great sounding board in real time when you're like, well, I think this is the right way to handle this, or I think, this is the right thing to say to this person. But what are your thoughts, Corey? And I know you'll come at it from a different angle, and that perspective is the perspective that I need. And all of that comes at a high basis of trust, which is so important in this business, internally and externally when client facing. And so having that trust and understanding and having that sounding board and having somebody who really truly understands that just the trials and tribulations of this business is a tremendous, tremendous advantage.
Yes, 100%. And I love for us, and I'm sure this would apply to other people who work together, is obviously we have very different personalities and different ways of solving problems and other ways to be resourceful that differ from one another. But what I think is so interesting is often we come to the same resolve to decision making or problem solving or whatever it is, but we just come at it from different perspectives. So I'll give an example here. So if we are pricing a property that might be quite complex, and we'll use like a low rise that might have a basement apartment and a detached garage, and maybe some parts of the house need some upgrades. So it's not exactly a shoe-in as terms of the evaluation. Ralph is amazing at walking through and having really good business instincts and gut instincts about property value and range, just by walking through and feeling the space. Me, I need to go at it from a much more analytical perspective and go back to my computer and pull the comps and create a spreadsheet and compare apples to apples or apples to oranges, and then really come around to what I feel is the perceived value. And what's always so amazing is we always come to the same range, even though we've come at it from two different lenses. And we apply that same sort of thinking to so many other ways that we come to a decision or we find our way through something. And it is so interesting to see like your brain versus my brain and how we always find that synergy. And I think we're really fortunate that we have that ability to bounce off ideas that way. And then it makes us feel really confident about our pursuits and the direction that we're going when we always come to that same place. Like we're never arguing about a decision or a way through something ever.
Ever. I think all of those are really, really valid points.
Good. Well, that's good because we need to be on the same page at the end of this
100%.
podcast too.
I agree with you, Corey.
Oh, that would be really weird if you didn't.
Yeah. What if we got into a full-blown argument
exactly.
on this podcast?
I think another advantage for us too is that, and I don't know if this is just unique to us, and I'd be curious to hear in the comments if other people feel the same way as well. I think we're really amazing, fast decision makers. Sorry. And I don't know how many people are like that. And if there's business couples out there where one is a slow decision maker and the other is a fast decision maker. But in our case, we are both fast decision makers. So, and that could be anything from hiring people. We're always on the same page. Our website design and the aesthetic of that, art direction, how to manage a negotiation, who should be the front lead in, let's say, a presentation or a pitch. Like we just know, and we make decisions not even like over a day. Usually it's like within an hour. Like if we had to buy a car together, it would be effortless for us to purchase a car in a day. Like we wouldn't be humming and hawing and making spreadsheets and analyzing cars up and down for months before we pursued one of those vehicles as an example.
No, I think it's good to understand the common numbers and the strong points and weak points, and it's okay to shop around. But I think having the ability to make quick decisions is actually like a muscle. And it's one of the traits that you see come up often when they look at traits of highly successful people. And I think it's also a trait of a highly successful and high functioning relationship where people can always be on the same page in terms of how they process information and how long it takes them to process information. And I think it's really good when you have people who can think intellectually, but then make decisions based on their gut, knowing that you can never properly plan out everything and put everything on a spreadsheet.
Yeah, like analysis paralysis is not a problem.
No, and I think that's another thing that makes us really unique in terms of doing what we do for a living and being in a relationship is that we see how other couples make their decisions and we see how other couples interact when making a big decision. And so often behind the scenes, BTS, Corey and I are like, wow, I'm glad we're not like that. I'm glad we're not so dysfunctional in terms of how we process information or make big decisions, and that we can always be on the same page. So I think for us, that's a strength and a blessing. And I consider us very fortunate to have that, because I think if we didn't, we wouldn't be as far off, whatever that means, as we are now. Yeah. And I think learning to trust your gut is so, so important.
And I feel that because we do trust our gut, I'm just always better when I do. The worst thing I can do is just get in my own way and be like, and like stew on something. And then all of a sudden, my response doesn't feel as authentic, or my ability to copyright, which is what I do a lot of for Fox Marin. And I all of a sudden lose like that ability to be creative if I start analyzing it too much. Or sometimes like if a client is like really, really upset about something, which happens all the time in this business, it's just better to like organically talk to them in the moment instead of procrastinating and humming and hawing and worrying about what you're going to say. It's just better to pick up the phone or message them back right away while you have that energy. And we're both very much like that and very instinctual. And we also trust each other that way too, which is very helpful in a working relationship, is that if you feel like you're like the best person to make a phone call, if you're like, Corey, you're the best person to respond to this email, and let's just like get on it right away, I know that we trust how each other's guts are working too. So we almost have two guts, which is great.
And I think the other aspect that's favorable about this dynamic is sometimes when we're working with a group, an individual, a couple, a team, it becomes evident right off the bat, or sometimes further as we go, which one of us relates better and connects better with them. And there are times where you're not going to connect with everybody. That's just human nature and reality. And so there are situations where Corey just seems to resonate better with the client or clients, or vice versa. Or sometimes it's one of us that takes the lead and then somehow organically we end up switching.
Yes.
And so it gives us the ability to be very dynamic in terms of how we're able to communicate with people, and it keeps it very fluid. And I think, again, that's another big advantage.
Huge. I also love that we can adapt our schedules really easily working together. Because as we mentioned, this business is relentless for hours. It's all day, every day. There's
Yes.
no days off, there's weekends. And we're often troubleshooting things. And I'm always like, as I said earlier, how do people do this alone? So now we know we have a team and we've built that up over time. But let's just like go back to those foundational years where it was just you and me. I mean, this is how it kind of all started. We were covering each other off and we were like, okay, you've got these people on Saturday. I also have these people on Saturday. How do we manage this? How do we get this done? Somebody needs to go to the warehouse. Somebody needs to meet the electrician. Somebody needs to meet the stagers. The client's only available in this window. I'm not. You are. Like, we're just constantly working through calendars and being as resourceful as possible with time management. And I don't know how a solo agent pulls it off. I really, truly do not know. But having each other to front all of these things and take on all that responsibility and scheduling is just a game changer. And the best part about it is that we're servicing our clients at their highest and best by having not only us, but then also the full team to back that up as well. And so I think that's a huge advantage for anyone working in a business partnership or a real estate partnership.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The flexibility of that, it's a huge advantage.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing that I think is an advantage, so we're still on advantages, is that we both have a natural excitement and enthusiasm for what we do, and we come at it and enjoy it for different reasons. But I think the thing that we both love about it, and please jump in here, Ralph, is that we just both love the entrepreneurial side, and that is creating the brand, the creativity, the vision, the fact that it's evolving, that we're constantly moving forward, and that we're seeing a big picture. And I think our mutual contribution to that is so interesting and makes things really interesting about what we do. But we both love that part of the business. And I think
Yes.
that mutual goal is really helpful for not us personally and professionally, but it makes the brand sing as well.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because success for any relationship is, I think, when people have a shared vision or shared objectives, and that could be outside of business, it could be personal, it could be spiritual, it could be fitness, but having those overreaching visions for where you are and where you are going is really, really important to having a healthy relationship. And I think it gives us a certain amount of balance because there's a common objective. It's not like one person is like, oh, I'm so upset you're working all the time. Why are you working all the time? It's more like we are working towards this. And did we move closer to this today or not? And so it's really nice when you have a relationship or a partner. And again, it doesn't have to be work related, but it's just the fact that you have a common goal or goals and you're working in tandem for it. And then it starts to remove things like guilt from the relationship because you're on the same page and you're supporting each other, working towards the same objective. And I think for us, we really see the business aspect and the brand aspect and the storytelling aspect a little differently. Like Corey, you're more on the storytelling, marketing, branding side, and I'm more on the business side. But again, they commingle and we help each other out and we move fluidly back and forth, again, towards that same goal. And I think we're very lucky to have that. And it's interesting because then we take that and then we apply that towards fitness in our life, or towards our finances in our lives, or towards our relationship to one another. And it's just like a muscle that when you start flexing it, you can then start to flex it in other aspects of your life. And I think when done properly, it can make a relationship a lot stronger. It also provides some challenges, and that's something we'll talk about a little later. But I think it can really make people come closer together when they're working towards a vision or visions or big picture.
I think that it's really important to celebrate achievements in life and
Yes.
milestones as you move through things, whether this is as somebody who's independent or working with somebody, and whether it's real estate or not. I think that acknowledging your wins and celebrating them, big and small, is hyper
Huge.
important. And I think as human beings, we often neglect to do that. And so I think you and I have gotten to a place now where we're really aware of the wins, no matter what they are, and making sure that we say it out loud and we celebrate them and we acknowledge them and we talk about our learnings and how these things have moved us forward. And I feel like I have a lot of gratitude that we have the ability to do that for one another, because it just reinforces everything and becomes a force multiplier.
100%. And we do that. It's interesting because I've read and seen in a bunch of places over time that just pops up where acknowledging those wins is so important, both personally and relationship wise. And you and I do it throughout the day. We'll text each other and be like, so and so happened. And it could be like, I went to Starbucks and I got a free coffee today. Win.
Yeah.
I hit a PR at the gym today. Win. We got this great new opportunity with a client. Win.
Exactly.
And that happens to us throughout the day. And we'll just text each other these little notes just as a way to continue to have that type of momentum. And it's never about, that massive win. It's about, at the end of a day, month, week, year, stacking up all of those wins. And some are this big and some are this big and some are this big. But when you look back, you are like, wow, what a great month, what a great quarter, what a great year. And it's just about stacking and celebrating those wins. And we do that with the team as well. And once a week, we send out a team win email to everybody on our team, because it's a mindset. And if you're always thinking and looking for the wins, you'll just manifest them and they'll just come to you and you'll continue to move towards them. And it's really important never to do the opposite. And if you're always focusing on the losses and the negatives, that will start to compound.
Yes.
And so it's a total mindset. And it's something that's amazing when you have a partner, both in life and in work, that you can share that with.
Totally.
And so I'm very grateful, Corey.
Oh, good. I also love that this is something that, Ralph, you're really good at doing. So oftentimes we're just in these insane work periods where you're just like, oh my gosh, somebody needs to do a documentary of behind the scenes right now because this is so insane. The intensity is so insane, or the stakes are so high, and things can feel really overwhelming. So I would say, for me personally, overwhelm is probably my biggest emotion that I feel when it comes to this business, where it's just like endless amount of things you could do and it never feels like enough. And Ralph, you're really good at saying to me, Corey, what do you need to do today to win this day? Not this week, not this month, not this year, just win this day. What do you need to do? And when you frame it like that, and we just break it down into like a short list, and then we recap at the end of the day and all those things are knocked off, I'm like, oh my God, it wasn't that bad. I feel like really fulfilled that all this got taken care of, and I feel better as to how I am approaching the next day as well. And I always love when you ask me that question, especially when I'm in that state where I'm like, I can't take on any more clients, can't take on any more listings, I can't redo the website right now, I don't have time to do social, whatever it is. You know how I get like that. So I think that that's a really helpful tool just in terms of celebrating the wins and then just making it about, let's just win this day. Don't worry about anything beyond that. I love that.
And it's so good when you so intimately know your partner is that you can help each other course correct when we see the other person spiraling in the wrong direction.
Yes.
Which can happen from time to time.
Yes. The advantage for Ralph is that my spiral is very outward and he'll know when I'm spiraling. Your spiral is very inward and you just go into like
brooding.
Yes. You retreat. So I'm like, what is happening over there? So mine's very obvious. Yours, not so much, but I do know you quite well. So when you get really quiet and you go off to like a lonely place, I'm like, what is happening there? There's a lot of processing happening. That's for sure.
Yes. Yes.
So I think another advantage is that, and this is really, really applies to anyone working with their partner or a partner in business, is our delineation of tasks and roles in the business. And we've really worked on this over time. This did not
Yes.
happen right away. So Ralph, let's
No.
talk about how we've leveraged each other's strengths and weaknesses to complement our work over the years. And let's just briefly talk about our different skills and expertise and why we did that.
Well, in any partnership, the more dynamic the partnership, the better the relationship, the better the business, the better the life, the better everything. If you're with somebody and you have the exact same strengths and weaknesses, you're not really helping each other move forward. You're helping, it's that idea of just having one foot nailed in the ground and going around in circles. It's really good in a relationship. It's really good in a work partnership when you're with somebody that you have different skill traits and that you have different things that you each bring to the table, because then you make each other better. Now, you may see things from a similar lens. You may have the same work ethic. You may have the same
Values,
morals
Yep.
and values, which is super, super, super important that you have that. But your skill sets and the things that you like to do and your personal strengths, it's much better when they're different. And I think for us, it was the recognition of that. And as we move from being sole agents to a team, to a bit brokerage, to a business, to a brand, it became more and more imperative that we do that and that we move into who we are as people and to what our strengths are as our roles within the business. And so I think the biggest difference between the two of us is I'm more macroeconomics, I'm more business, I'm more sort of big picture. And I think, Corey, you are more creative, you're more on the branding side. You're very much, well, I might be more of the brain of the business. I think you are the heart of the business and you are the voice of the business. I think it's important to have those two different perspectives and those two different skill sets in order to really create a growing, thriving business and brand, especially in a market like ours and one that is a business that is so heavily based on trust and connection.
Yes. I think you said that so well. And I think another way to think about it too is I often think that you are the big idea person, but somebody has to take all those ideas and execute on them. And so I think that the doing part of it, like somebody has to just be like, okay, like we have to like get this done. And so I think I'm more of like the doer and you are like the big vision person. And if I could swap roles in my next lifetime, I'd prefer to have probably your brain than mine. But I do agree that these are our strengths and it works really well. And I think it's really important to note that that was not obvious from the beginning. And it was really hard. It was like a lot of push pull because I think we felt like we had to do everything and like do everything together side by side. And we don't do that at all anymore. And I think through some help with some really interesting coaches, not all good coaches, but some decent coaches over the years, and then a couple really good ones that we've worked with have helped us separate that and be okay with it. Like, for example, when we were talking with one of our coaches and I realized I'm like, I'm a terrible leader. And he's like, Corey, that's totally okay. Like, you do not have to be a leader. Ralph is naturally a really good leader. Ralph can be the leader. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank God. We both don't have to be leaders. I was so relieved. It was like therapy for me, this coaching session that we had. And so I think that it's so interesting how that's evolved over time and that we've made peace with the fact that we both have strengths and weaknesses. And then now we can just keep working on making those better and better.
Awesome. 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 Awesome.
Okay. So we talked about the advantages and there's so many advantages and I want people to feel like there's advantage, but let's talk about the disadvantages because that's probably where there's the juicier stuff.
100%.
Okay. So disadvantages definitely for me is, and I'm sure you're the same, is that we talk about work so much. Like
a lot. Like you almost said 24/7 and you probably wouldn't be that
I
far
almost said
off.
it and I was like,
I know.
23/7?
Yeah, exactly. We do sleep for an hour. here and there.
Like we talk about work a lot. It's so, I
Yeah.
mean, real estate already is hard to separate from because it is a 24/7 thing for reals. Like you're never really finished. It just goes on, and your clients can ping you at 11 o'clock at night and all weekend, and you see people 7 days a week. So already it makes it difficult to have that line in the sand between work and your life. And then you compound that with us working together. And then you compound that with us managing a brokerage and a team together. I mean, it's really hard not to talk about it. And like, it is kind of juicy and interesting what we do. So there is a lot to discuss. Did you want to add anything to that?
Of course. I didn't know you were
I know.
finished.
I'm just like, there's a lot to discuss. Like, I'm like,
Ralph, you're leaving me hanging here. Don't leave me hanging.
Okay, sorry.
Rule number 1 in a successful real estate relationship business: never leave your wingman hanging. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of challenges, especially in a business like ours, which is a 24/7 business. So it's not like it's an online business or a restaurant that closes at a certain hour and opens up at a certain hour, which gives you some type of predictability and regularity. Like anything can happen in our business, and there's amazing, wonderful, exciting things because of that, meaning that you wake up on the phone and you could get a phone call that, or an email that just changes your entire year or maybe even decade, or something arises like that. But similarly, on the negative side, you can have things turn out not so well, and you can have somebody send you a passive aggressive email or text at 11 o'clock at night just before you're trying to go to bed. And that definitely enters into your relationship. And so while there's a lot of good with it, a lot of challenges start to rear their head, because then where does the relationship start and the business stop, and the business stop and the relationship start? Because you're being bombarded with all kinds of messages and emails and people needing responses in real time at all times of the day and night. And so having those boundaries is a real challenge, and something, even after all of this time in the business and in a relationship, that we are still trying to work through. I think having a team and being able to share responsibilities with is huge to that. But also, it's just an understanding that, this is the business that we signed up for, and this is part of it. And how do we manage that? And, do we turn our phones off at 9 o'clock at night because we're going to bed? Do we book a weekend off? Do we try to turn our phones off? Can we take our dog for a walk with our phones off for an hour? So it's trying to figure out that, and also just knowing that, again, going back to the emotionality of our business, is that there's a lot of highs and lows, and there's a lot of moments where you feel like you're a master of the universe. And then there are moments where you feel like you're an idiot and you're going to go bankrupt tomorrow. And so how you manage that in conjunction with a relationship and a partnership, it can be really tough, because when you have a small business, which is what we do have, it's hard not to personalize things because it's your name on the door. And so balancing all of that is a real challenge. And knowing that those stresses get processed differently, as Corey was saying, she's more outwardly emotional and I'm more inward. How do you then handle that when you're both going through a stressful time? So I think in a relationship, when you can make it through those trying times, it does make you stronger, and it probably makes you stronger than a lot of other couples. But it's also a lot of challenge and hardship and heartbreak can go with that as well. And it needs to be managed in all the time.
Yes. And like other things layer on top of that, like exhaustion or domestic chores, or one person in this partnership sleeps better than the other. And
Who's that?
yes, it's pretty obvious who that would be, likely.
Who looks more well rested today?
Your lighting is better than mine, though. So, like, I think, yeah. So sometimes it's not the other partner's actions, it's the spillover of what happened on your phone, or the spillover of what happened with a deal that went sideways that day, or a spillover of something that happened with I don't know, like a staging mishap that happened, and then it spills over to other things like who's cooking dinner and who has to do the dishwasher, and oh my God, your laundry's still in the dryer and you haven't folded it yet, whatever it is, like typical couple stuff that happens with any couple living in a home together. That is normal. And then just like layer in the stress of the work that we do, and then layer in the fact that it's just like it could happen all day, every day, and all weekend. And so when we go out for dinner and stuff like that, like we are talking about work, I'd say like 90% of the time. Like it's not like
80%.
80%. Sure.
80%.
80%. But we do love it. So that's the other thing. It's like we do love it. And I think it's when we talk about it off hours, whatever that means, it's a lot of the time it's the big picture stuff. Like, Ralph, I really want to like look at the fonts on our website and I want to like upgrade this. And you're like, oh, I was thinking about this idea and like, how could we make this process better? So we often are talking about big picture stuff, not necessarily the nitty gritty, but still it is a lot. There is no boundary for sure.
None. And then another challenge is on the financial side. It can bring, again, a lot of tremendous highs and lows. You can have some really big wins and a lot of great years, but you can also have some big losses and you can have some real flat moments because some of what you do, not all, but a good portion of it is dependent on interest rates and where the market is. Like we try to never think that way by building a very solid predictable business. But at the same point in time, there are things that happen beyond your control. And real estate, maybe more so than a lot of other industries, can swing violently one way or the other very quickly. And so, like I look at my sister and she has a contractor type job. She's in film, but her husband has a very stable paying job.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of wisdom to being in a relationship where one person just has that steady, bankable income coming in versus a couple continually riding the highs and lows. Or when you have a situation where you have that stable person with the income and the other person has these highs and lows, it gives a certain amount of insurance knowing that at least you have X amount of dollars coming in every month, which is something you and I just don't have.
We do not.
No, we do not.
And the other advantage, if one of us had, let's say, a full-time corporate job, that person would probably get really great benefits, or maybe they have a pension. They could take vacation pay, which we definitely don't have, and then, or take a leave of absence. Like there's many bonuses of one of the sides of a partnership being in like a full-time corporate job for sure. And we definitely don't have that stability. But I know that we have the vision to be like, okay. And also we've practiced the highs and lows. Like we know what it feels like to have like a really good year and a softer year. We know what it feels like to be in real estate during a global pandemic now. I mean, like we've had a lot of practices of highs.
And a foreign buyer's ban and 500 basis point increase in interest rates in 2 years. Like, we know all that.
Yes. And we also know how to move through hard things. And so because of those different experiences, I think now we have the confidence to be like, okay, this next couple months are going to be rocky, but we've done this before and we will see it through to the other side. Whereas a decade or so ago, I don't think we'd have that same level of confidence, and it would have been a lot scarier, and it would have been easier to be like, you know what, Ralph, I'm just going to get a job at Starbucks where I get like full benefits right now and, whatever the dental program that they have. And we'll just know that money is always in our bank account and paying our mortgage will not be a problem.
No.
All right. So we mentioned this, that we get to celebrate our highs together and our wins together. But I think we should talk about the fact that we have to like mourn our disappointments together. Like, what does that look like when we work together, Ralph?
Commiserations loves company.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's one of the things that can happen. And sometimes it's one of us that feels the hit more than the other, maybe because we were more either responsible or on the front line than the other. So sometimes it's really important to acknowledge the loss, but to move on as quickly as possible. And again, knowing each other so well from an emotional standpoint, we can try and help the other one work through the situation so that we can turn around as quick as possible, because being in that state is not a good place to live, let alone function or run a business. And so when we have those losses, which they do happen, we're there to help each other move through it. But it can really affect things because in a normal relationship, you're not taking these type of hits and you're not having these type of external client relationships or whatever affect your morning coffee, or affect whether your travel plans, or affect whether you can buy a new pair of jeans this month or not. Like it can really affect things in a very, very dramatic way. And so I think we can help each other through it, but at the same point in time, there's a lot of external stimuli, more so than in an average relationship, that can really affect things at home. And trying to manage that, I think, is a really, really, really big challenge for sure.
Yep. Love it. That's a really good way to summarize it.
And I think also the challenge of just trying to find personal time is really, really important. And I think we, over time, being what I would consider to be workaholics, have really learned how to support each other in having personal time. Because if not, this business, there is never not a million things to do. And if we wanted to and had the ability to, we could work 24 hours a day. And so trying to create some type of balance with personal time and helping each other do that, I think, is a real challenge in our relationship, because our business really is calling us all the time. And it never, ever is enough. And so trying to protect each other's personal time, be like, Corey, you know what? You have something you want to go to see some friends, or go see Les Mis with your sister on Thursday or whatever. I will do whatever I have to protect that window for you, and vice versa. But that has come over time, and us just understanding that we really need to protect each other's personal time so that we can have things in our lives and passions and experiences in our lives, not just even outside of work, but even outside of one another, so that those are things that when you come back home or I come back home, those are things that just make our relationship stronger. And again, this is something we've had to learn over time, to not just make the space for, but to protect it for the other person, because it's so easy for Corey to say, you know what, I'll just cancel Les Mis. I'm going to, write that pricing analysis and send it over to our client right away. Instead of me jumping and saying either I'll do that or we'll do that when you get back or tomorrow or whatever. But it's really important that you go turn your phone off. I'll deal with this offer that's coming in on 32 Main Street.
Yes. And I think it's just important to say that these personal endeavors are done separately, and we're like adventuring off on our own without one another. And then when we regroup, it's like really fun, because I'm like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in 4 hours. What happened?
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. I think the last point I want to talk about, disadvantages, and I feel like this could be a podcast on its own. And please, viewership, if you're watching this far along, I'd just be so interested in your comments and about the angle on this. And I think this is external pressure. So this is sort of has to do with perception more than anything else. And I think this has impacted our relationship in terms of a business partnership, for me anyways, more than anything else. And so from the outside, I think people are like, oh my gosh, you guys have it all. You work together. You love each other. You're so lucky. You have a successful business. And I know we've worked really, really, really hard for that. And we are so fortunate. I think one thing that comes up for me often is, and might be a gender bias, and I'm not really sure, so this is where I'm looking for some feedback, is a lot of the time I feel like there's a perception that Ralph runs the business, Ralph is the brains of the operation, and I, as a female with long blonde hair, am just along for the ride. And I think this has been something that's been a challenge for us personally, because Ralph has had to deal with me feeling insecure about the idea that people think that I'm just, looked after by you, and that you've created everything and I'm just here, with a pretty face from time to time and a bubbly personality, and like I don't really do anything. And so I'd love to talk about this a bit more, because I bet you that a lot of couples that work together deal with this exact same thing. And I've had conversations with other couples outside of real estate that deal with that. And so I think it's a really important topic because actually, out of all the challenges when it comes to working and living together, this one I think is my biggest one.
And I think it's so interesting that you say that because you really do have a pretty face and a bubbly personality, but I might be very biased on that topic.
Thank you, Ralph.
But you also have a tremendous role to play in the company, and you're 50+% of the reason why we've gotten to where we've gotten to and the successes that we've had. And so, I do see it too, where we're in meetings and the way somebody will just look at me or listen to me and dismiss you or not give what you're saying the same weight. And there is no other reason, in my opinion, other than the male-female dynamic. And so it's very important to me to always constantly, not just in private, but in public, to be talking about the contribution that you make and the importance of you being on board with any decision that needs to be made. Because I know I'm not making a decision about our business unless you're 100% on board.
Thank you, Ralph. I think this is
That's just because I trust your judgment and I trust you.
Thank you. Well, I do know for a fact that you are an exceptional leader and have an amazing brain, and you are a thought leader and have so many. I love your opinion and that you're decisive and people really look up to, and you're a strong mentor to people. Like, all of that is a given. So it makes sense to me so easily why that is a perceived aspect of how we work together, because you are those things. Like that, there's no doubt in my mind. And so you are those things. You live it and breathe it, and you are. That's genuinely who you are. And so I think it's more the idea that, I'm just at home and I'm going to the gym today, and, I have this title just because it looks nice. And I don't think it's easy for people to really understand the amount of grit I actually have. And I don't know if that's like a female thing or the fact that we work together and how that looks maybe like on a picture. But I know for myself that as somebody in this sort of part of the dynamic, you have to, over time, really just know this for yourself and be totally okay with how it's perceived, because people want to see it that way. Like you can't prove it. You just have to know it. And by learning that over time and like not needing so much validation from other people over a long period of time, or feeling like I have to prove it all the time, has made, I think, this dynamic, or one of the disadvantages of us working together, a lot easier on both of us, because I'm not so stressed about that anymore, that perception.
And I think going back to the topic of external pressures, it's one of the things that you and I have learned over time, to a certain extent, is just really not caring what a lot of people think. And it's interesting, as we learn to do or continue to put out more content and more video, how you just have to be comfortable with someone sitting in their parents' basement in their underwear, 250 pounds overweight, who's never left their house or done anything, who just wants to just make negative comments on your YouTube channel or on an Instagram video, or a position that you're taking on something, So I think it's really important, because it used to be when we would go out and film something and then put it out, there'd be a negative comment that would get into our personal life. And that would affect us and it would rattle us, because you're putting yourself out there. When you put yourself out there and have conversations that are vulnerable, or you put yourself out there with an opinion and somebody just seeks to just berate it and rip it apart, or, just focus on your hair or whatever else in order to try and make some type of point that they feel makes them feel better about themselves. You just have to, over time, develop a real thick skin so that when these things happen, they roll off your shoulders and it doesn't affect you or your relationship or at home. And that's something that, again, takes time. It's just learning not to let these external pressures affect you.
Yes. And it does still slip in from time to time. Like, don't get me
Oh,
wrong.
yes.
I do not wear like a huge bronze armor suit every day. And like many times
No.
these things do affect me. But yes, over time for sure. So please comment in the comment section about this, because I think it's such an interesting topic and I'd love to explore it more. And I know, a lot of women that work in boardrooms or as executives or whatever it is would be like 1,000,000%. This happens to me all the time. Like, we should move on because this is getting lengthy. I just want to talk about some of the ways we've bridged the gap, but kind of like as takeaways for couples working together, whether it's in real estate or other entrepreneurs or businesses. What do you think are the top 3 takeaways or pieces of advice, Ralph, that we could give to people that we have learned over time about this dynamic?
Number one, first and foremost, working in separate locations.
Yes.
It is so important so that even though you have a business, you're going in separate directions at 7 a.m. when you wake up in the morning. And one is going to the office and one is working from home or going to a different space.
Yes.
I think having that type of separation physically is super, super, super important.
Yes.
And I think me going to our office and Corey working at home really gives us that separation, that we're not continually on top of each other and driving each other crazy. So I think that I would say is number one. Number two is trying to do what you can to create boundaries. So when you are together, let's say you're having dinner or let's say you're walking your dog and it's Sunday morning, just leave the phones at home or turn the phones off for an hour and just have time that's uninterrupted. I think is really, 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 really important as a way to set up boundaries. And I think we call them extracurriculars, but having things that you like to do that are outside of the business and outside of the relationship that you guys can do, or that you can do aside from one another, be it going to the gym and working out, be it some type of a hobby or some type of a class. I think having those things are so, so important. Because you are in a high pressure business and you're getting hit with so much external forces, being able to just shut down and do other things without each other or aside from each other are super, super important.
Yes. And the extracurricular activities, because we call them that, which is hilarious that we call it that, is just, it's really hard to commit to because it's more time away from a business that is all the time. But I think if you can force yourself to take that hour to yourself, it just makes the work and the relationship so much better. So we are like
100%.
mega fans. We've just introduced, we call them ECs. We've just introduced these extracurriculars and it's been a game changer. So highly
For sure.
recommend. Okay. We said okay at the same time. All right. I think
Amazing.
we've covered a lot.
We have so much in common, Corey.
We do. We have so much in common.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You.
This behind the scenes discussion about real estate couples or any business
Absolutely.
couples. What do you say, Ralph?
I said absolutely.
Absolutely. We hope this chat shed some light on the intricate balance of personal connection and business.
Yes.
And please stay tuned for more episodes where we bring you closer to the people and the stories that shape Toronto's real estate market. Until next time, please, happy house hunting. Ralph, what would you like to say to close things off today?
Thank you so much for joining us. If you like this content, please be sure to give that thumbs up. It helps the YouTube algorithm. And if you have anything absolutely constructive to say, we'd love to hear from you down below. And please be sure to subscribe if you are not already a Fox Marin YouTube subscriber. So thank you so much for joining. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day and has learned a little bit from some of our journey in terms of working as a couple in real estate.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ralph. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. See you tonight, Corey.
See you tonight.